What is Kizomba? On a surface level, we can say it's a couple dance, it's a musical genre, and it's also sometimes used more generally to describe Angolan culture. But if we dig a little bit deeper than that, it gets a bit more complicated. So buckle up, let's see. My name is Kirsi vanSol, and I'll be your guide to Angolan dances and culture. In this video, I'll explain what Kizomba is from two perspectives. What the world outside of Angola thinks that it is, and what it actually is in Angola. Without going too deep into the history of Kizomba, let's just say that due to the civil war, many Angolans fled their country and came to live in Portugal. And the biggest populations of Angolans live here in Lisbon area, where I live. And a lot of other Africans from the former colonies were also gathering here. So these people are called the Palop, former Portuguese colonies in Africa. And they would gather in their own nightclubs and discotheques. Portugal was still quite segregated in the 80s and 90s, and even in the beginning of this millennium. They would have their own discos where they would go and meet each other and to kill the saudade that they felt in their hearts, longing for their homeland, and to dance. And Angolans were always known as the dancers. They brought their dance from Angola with them, and they are the dancing people. When the Angolans arrived, the swag arrived. Eventually, some Portuguese people would join the Palop people in these nightclubs, and everybody got curious and interested. They wanted to learn this dance because it's so cool. And Mestre Pechu is one of the first teachers of Kizomba outside of Angola. Now, Mestre Pechu himself is a traditional dancer. He's a traditional ballet dancer and a teacher. Traditional dances being tribal dances, solo dances from Angola. But of course, he was also dancing socially, and so people asked him if he could teach them too, because they wanted to learn. So Mestre Pechu had to analyze and break it down and think of how he could bring this and convey this knowledge to people who don't have background in Angolan dances. And slowly he started to create his own teaching method for Kizomba. Around the same time or shortly thereafter, some other teachers emerged. For example, some Cape Verdean and Guinea-Bissauan teachers. And they started teaching according to their understanding of Kizomba. And they brought in their style and their interpretation and their taste in music. And so the Kizomba that spread outside of Angola from Portugal was already one branch off of the original. And thus the Portuguese fusion was born right here in Lisbon. From Portugal, this Kizomba would spread around Europe and very strongly to France, where the African and Caribbean populations just took it right in. And they once again changed the music to match their tastes. And because usually music is what drives the dance, it got altered step by step, further and further away from the original. Now they like to dance Kizomba to a lot of Cape Verdean music like ghetto zouk, cabo zouk, but also Caribbean zouk and compa and various pop mixes with a slow zouk beat on top of instrumentals and so on. And this of course changes the dance because they must go hand in hand, right? And eventually in Paris, this would change so much that it actually branched out into a whole new dance that now is known as Urban Kiz, but that's a whole different story. We will leave that to another teacher, and we'll stick with Kizomba. And this name, Kizomba, was still used for all of these fusions and all of these variations that were spreading like wildfire now across the world. And teachers were bringing their own fusions to everywhere. Very popular from Asia to North America, to Brazil, to Finland, everywhere. You would hear about Kizomba, and everywhere it would look a bit different, according to the teacher. The teachers would also tell different stories about the dance they were teaching. And this is maybe why you have heard different stories about Kizomba. It even happened to some of my students many, many years ago that they went to Cape Verde to combine a beach holiday with dancing Kizomba, and they came back 2 weeks later very disappointed because they didn't find any Kizomba on Cape Verde. There isn't any. There are other dances, but no Kizomba. You may find some fusion Kizomba actually these days, but in this case it's a recent import. In the recent years, some dancers have started to travel to Angola to check out Kizomba at the roots. For example, with me and my colleague, we organize travels, but many others organize travels, and so people go to Luanda and they go to a dance party, a Kizombada, to dance Kizomba. And they are shocked, because when they come to the party, what they see and what they hear is completely different from anything they ever learned before. The music is faster, it has this high energy and lots of layers of instruments on top of each other, different rhythms. And the dancers are dancing in a very close embrace, in tight circular patterns, and it's different. What is this? This is Kizomba? This brings us to part 2. Like I said in the beginning, we're going to look at Kizomba from what the world thinks it is and what it actually is in Angola. And in Angola, it is much more than just the dance or the music. It is their culture and their heritage. Now, the word Kizomba in itself, it's a Kimbundu language word meaning party. And Kimbundu is spoken by the Ambundu people in Angola, but Kizomba is for all Angolans. Wait, it's mainly for the city dwellers. It's biggest in Luanda, the mega city, their capital, but also found in Benguela and Malange and other cities in Angola. So it's an urban dance. And at the Kizombadas, Kizomba parties that they have, everybody dances together. Mother, son, neighbors, siblings, uncles, cousins, whoever. Everyone can dance together. And in these parties, there's much more than dance and music. There's the food, the very important part of the culture. And they oftentimes have various types of music and dancing. They may have poetry readings. They may have a comedian. Angolans like all kinds of performing arts and culture, and they bring that to their Kizomba parties frequently. So if you go to an Angolan Kizombada, you may experience much more than Kizomba dancing. And of course, Kizomba has had its evolution all the time, continuously in Angola. It never went anywhere, as it is a living, evolving, contemporary, mainly urban art. And it had its big revival after the years of war were over, when the young generation really took it to themselves and pushed it to new levels of expression. And the first national championships were organized in 2009, and the winner was Dilson Rosario, who then had a chance to come to Europe several years in a row. He would visit Europe and the rest of the world and bring his spectacular dancing to Europeans, like nothing we'd ever seen here. And that's how I met Dilson Rosario in 2014, and he became my master, like I call him now. But I digress again. Kizomba as a dance is such a rich art and has a lot of different schools and masters and regional differences. However, the similarities are much greater than the differences. But yes, if you travel to Angola, you will experience Kizomba being taught in slightly different ways, depending on who you're learning from. They have not yet codified the teaching systems, but this is going to happen. It's happening now and in the near future. Why this codification has not happened before, this is my guess. I think they have wanted to preserve all that richness and all those different expressions and not lose that, because this is how the art evolves. However, there is this pressure now on codifying it and creating a system with which it can be taught in a uniform way across the world in the future, like has been done with the Argentinian tango. And this reason why this would be happening now is that Kizomba is on its way to the UNESCO World Heritage List. As I said, Angolan culture. And this puts some pressure on it to be codified. And I really hope that we don't lose the richness of it in this. As I said, the similarities in the dance styles are much bigger than the differences. So anytime you see Angolans dancing, even if you don't hear the music, you recognize it as Kizomba. Now, I know that your next question is going to be, but aren't they dancing Semba? That's not Kizomba they're dancing in all these videos, right? And the answer to that is yes, and it's a bit complicated again. Because ask any Angolan and they will tell you that it's one dance. Kizomba and Semba are really just one dance, but depending on the music, you dance it in a different way, like on different ends of the scale of the same dance. Music is the king. And if you go to an Angolan Kizombada, you will actually hear a lot of different kinds of music, usually at the good parties at least. Not just Kizomba and Semba, but you will hear some of their versions of Latin music. They make their own fusions. They can dance, for example, rumba angolana, bolero angolana, or merengue angolana. They sometimes dance different dances at these parties, and it's all Kizomba. So those dances we can talk about in some other videos, but for here, to summarize this, what is Kizomba? It is the music, it's the dance, it's the party, it's Angolan culture. Psst. For more videos like this, hit those buttons.